following program is a production of Hōʻike Kauai Community Media.
Thank you for coming. As you all know, our talk today is going to be done by the Planning Department. Three topics: the Wildfire Urban Interface, the Kauai Climate Action Plan, and the East Kauai Community Plan. This is part of a taste for, they'll be making another presentation probably in February next month, which will be related almost strictly to the Lihue plans. Okay, a number of things I need to mention. First, our next month's speaker will be Dote from the Board of Water Supply. He has a board meeting at 9 o'clock that same day. Of course, that's normally when we end here. So we're going to start that meeting at 7:45. He's going to end it at 8:30, and that's our annual meeting. So I'll conduct an annual meeting once he walks up and gets back. I don't know why he thinks his board meeting is more important than speaking to us, but that's his decision. Let's see. On your tables, you're going to see a flyer from Duke's Restaurant. First is always try to make a contribution to Duke's there. It doesn't go to the corporation, it goes to the staff, so please make a donation there. But I actually read the brochure, and it looks like a pretty good deal. If my wife and I come down here for dinner and we spend $50, of course, unlikely we're going to spend only $50. But if we do spend $50 will be contributed by Duke's to the Hawaii Food Bank, the Kauai division. So please consider coming down to Duke's for one, because it's a wonderful place to eat, and secondly, to make a contribution. Let's see. Because we already, October is our last presentation. We have started with our presentation for next year already. In fact, we probably have 3 or 4 largely set. We're going to start in January this year. But you are our members, or you are people in our community. If there's topics you think should be presented in the meeting, please get hold of a board. Let's see, we have a couple board members. Any board members here, raise your hand so people know who you are. Okay, so if there's a topic and you think we ought to discuss it, get hold of one of us at this meeting or the next meeting, because that's how we appreciate it. I'm going to tell you a few of the topics we are actively looking at for next year. Kupono and Hōʻike care. We haven't had a presentation from PMRF. I don't know if the new captain is somebody willing to come, but if you don't ask, you don't get, so I'm going to ask. AIUC, David doesn't know that I'm going to ask him, but given that we are now, we had a community meeting in Hanapeka yesterday, so now that we're actively going out in the community and talking about our 2 new plans coming up, I think he's going to be willing to talk. I mentioned already, County of Kaua is going to be presenting again about Lihue. KCC is volunteered to talk. Almost last, we're going to have probably maybe our January speaker is going to be about the invasive species that are happening here on Kauai. And lastly, Grove Farm doesn't know it yet, but we want somebody from the airport, we don't know who. Somebody from Grove Farm to talk about what's happening down at the airport and at the industrial park there. So those are, again, these are not set. We haven't asked people about them, but these are the kinds of things that we think are happening in our community that you all might want us to talk about. So we welcome your contributions. Anybody have any community announcements they want to make? Jeez. There we go. One. You can't talk loud enough.
Yeah. Coming up, if you have a dog, coming up October 11th, Star 94.3 and Kukui Grove Center present the 6th annual Howl the Wing Doggy Costume Contest. And it is fun. If you don't have a dog, come show up because there's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you. October 11th.
Anything with dogs is going to be a lot of fun. Okay, if there are no other questions, Kaina, I'm going to let you introduce your staff, and I'll let you all figure out who's going to speak first.
How's it all? Kind of all with the Kauai Planning Department. Thank you for having us. Jody was originally, I think you guys might have seen, Jody, our deputy, was supposed to be doing the briefing, and she was going to brief you folks on the work that she's been doing with our team for the Lihue area and possibly looking at design policies moving forward. That got frozen a little bit because the work is still not at its infant level, but not quite ready to be engaged and at a level to really bring it out, I guess. So with the agenda, we can definitely give an update on other fronts that the planning department is at. So on turn it over, we have Alicia Summers here with our long range division and Marie Williams. We'll be going over, Marie will kind of give an introduction or overview of our East Kauai community plan, which we're eyeballs deep in with the community over there. And then Alicia's going to give an update on the Climate Adaptation and Action Plan, which is just about to be finalized after 2 years of work. And then I'll go into some of the work we've been doing with the wildfire resiliency and strategies in the plantation. I'll turn it over to Marie. You going first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ka'aina. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. We're so grateful for the LBA and this platform. I wish every town had a business association like this one. And we really appreciated working with all of you on our various projects over the years, all the way back from the Lihue Town Core Urban Design Plan, which I think helped build the LBA as well, back 15 years ago at this point. But I'm speaking on the East Kauai Community and Circulation Plan. This is a community plan. And I feel like most of you know what a community plan is or a town plan is, given your work on these projects over the years. But essentially, how land use policy works is at the county level, it starts with our general plan. This is a very important plan. It's set by county charter, our county code, state law, that our general plans are meant to direct both zoning and how we grow and council action, meaning what we spend our funds on and how we direct the growth and improvements on our roads, for a good example of that. But the general plan, of course, is a high-level plan. And so it really takes these town-level plans to focus on what those specific changes should be. And that's what we're doing with the East Side right now. And so we're really excited to revisit this plan. There is an existing Wailuakapa'a plan, but it was completed nearly 50 years ago at this point. And so it's really overdue that we look not only at the town core, but at how the region has grown and what we can do to direct future growth and address the impacts of growth as well. Where we are in the process is we did launch the public process for the plan over a year ago. There was an open house. And then since then, we've had very specific work with a working group. We've had a youth council as well. This is the first time we've ever had a youth group kind of help lead the plan, and we've really enjoyed that. We have done a series of workshops. This summer, we just completed our 5th workshop. I invite all of you to visit plankauai.com. All the materials from our various 5 workshops are online, the presentations, the posters, and it's very easy for you to kind of look through things and add a comment. And so there's still time. We're leaving the comments open until October 16th. And so we'd love for you to visit the website and provide some feedback. But we are, in fact, at the stage where now it's time to collate the amazing feedback, all the concerns that we've heard over the past year, and we will begin the process of drafting a plan. And so what you can expect from us is in a couple months, probably in spring, we will be out once more and do another series of workshops or perhaps an open house, possibly a survey, to get feedback on this plan, on the maps, on what projects that we need to move. and where we want growth, what that growth should look like as well. So we're really excited to get to that point and get to the point where we finally have an updated land use and transportation plan for our east side. And with that, sorry, I did have a slideshow prepared with some images of what some of these draft land use map concepts are, but it might be a little tough to explain it. But again, visit the project website, and it will answer some questions as well. Okay, thank you. And maybe we'll save questions for the end, or do you want them now?
You want to do it now?
We can entertain any questions on our East Kauai community plan, if you have any, or any ideas you want to share with us right now about what you think this plan should include.
I didn't attend the last meeting, the East Kauai, and I meant to.
Couldn't find it.
But what did the audience, what were the concerns that came out of the audience that you all either addressed or you will now be addressing?
Yeah, our last workshop was on economic development and parks, so it definitely covered a wide range of issues. And maybe Alicia, you can help with this too, because we did break into small groups, and every group discussed a different aspect of that. But in my group, which kind of focused on how we can address things like a lack of restrooms. People wanted to see more transit service as well. A lot of concern about whether or not we can improve the tourism experience for people on the west side. On the east side as well. But yeah, there's probably people really want to see change, and what we're trying to do through these workshops is kind of sift through these ideas and see what the county can really do. And so we still have to go through that process of, figuring out what will arise and be put in the plan. Alicia, do you want to share anything from your small group at the workshop?
Hi, everyone. So our last workshop was Parks, Recreation, and Economic Development. And the way that the workshop was structured was that we first had a little presentation followed by a panel with some industry experts, as well as some county representatives for our Parks and Recreation Department and our Office of Economic Development. And then we split into different small groups. So like Marie was talking about, her small group focused on the tourism industry and small businesses. And I also helped to facilitate a small group focused on agriculture and health services. There was a lot of concern about our aging population in my group. In the panel, one of our panelists was Lance Segawa, and he stressed the importance of just being more prepared for our aging population. So I think when we got into my group, that's immediately what people really latched onto. And so there was a lot of discussion in my group on how can we better incentivize programs and initiatives to be able to better care for our elderly population and to be able to incentivize more elderly care facilities, and how can potentially the Mahilona Master Plan better address these issues. And so it was good to have those conversations, as well as having some important people in the room who are involved in the Mahilona Master Plan also present at that conversation. We also talked a lot about agriculture. As you guys are all probably aware about, agriculture is a problem that's very difficult to address for our entire island. And so it was very tricky to be able to focus the conversation on specifically the issues as it pertains to the east side. But there was a lot of discussion about the lack of important agricultural lands designations on the east side, and how we can better address that so that we can better protect our agricultural lands, as well as how we can bolster more of an ag workforce and how we can get, we have part of this process, I don't know if Marie mentioned it, but we do have a youth council. And we had conversations with them about job opportunities and what sort of jobs they would like to see on the east side. And something that they really emphasized was wanting to see more internship opportunities. So that was kind of like a conversation that came into play both when talking about health services and agriculture. Like, can there be any development of programs or support to be able to encourage more internships to take place on the high school or even middle school level? Yeah, I don't know if.
Yeah. And if you're interested in what the comments thus far have been, you can visit online as well. There was a survey, and the summary of that survey and what we heard is online as well. And so, yeah, and again, the plan's not done, so please visit the website and provide some feedback. Really appreciate that. Any other questions? If not, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is the bike path from Kapa'a all the way out to Nanini Point, is that addressed in your plan at all? Because I know that it's on the drawing board and we walked it with a couple of council members.
Yeah, it's not only on the drawing board, but it is in our STIP, our State Transportation Improvement Program. It's like a 5-year program to figure out where all the federal funding that we get for roadway and other transportation improvements comes from. So it is on like year 5 or 6 of this tip. So, but yes, that has come up a whole bunch. People would really like a low stress route where they can ride a bike, maybe an e-bike, or walk, or jog from the east side all the way into town. So yeah, that I'm sure that will be addressed in the draft plan as a very important project. Thank you. Okay, maybe we'll move on to our next project. Oh, okay, sorry.
How fluid are these plans? Like, when you make a plan, is it set in stone or is it more of a working document? Just on the idea that 50 years ago was the last plan and a lot's changed. So if they're, how fluid are these to change?
These plans are adopted. So they aren't fluid. But they are not meant to sit for 50 years. They are meant to be updated or looked at. Sometimes the language is 5 years, like you have to kind of open it up and look, but they're really meant to be updated every 10 years. I think it's more an issue of that it does take funding and staff time and staff to do these projects. So we're trying to get through them as fast as we can, but they are meant, you're right, they aren't meant to be a static plan guiding land use and growth for longer than 10 to 20 years. So yeah, we're trying to work on improving that process. Thank you. All right, and now we'll move on to the Kauai Climate Adaptation and Action Plan. Here, Michelle.
Thanks, Marie, and thank you everyone for allowing us the opportunity to present some of our projects. Like Marie, it was kind of funny, I had a slideshow that I was gonna show, but probably isn't as important as Marie's slideshow since she was gonna show all the potential land use changes. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about our Climate Adaptation and Action Plan. This has been a plan that's been going on and been developed for the past few years. And I know that some of you all in the audience have also been coming to some of our engagement efforts for this, so it's not entirely new. In fact, right now we're at the very end stage of this plan. We're in the process of finalization. And we just did a round of our last round of open houses where we went out to the community and showed them the draft plan to be able to get feedback on that, so that we could then incorporate their comments to finalize the plan and get it signed off on. And so maybe just to ground us, I'll first talk about why we went ahead in developing this plan. So as you all are very aware, Kauai is very vulnerable to climate change hazards. These hazards vary from things like rising sea levels, extreme heat. You guys are all very aware with the extreme rain events. There's going to be an increase in the severity and frequency of storm events. We have been hearing a lot about wildfire, especially with what happened in Maui, as well as what happened last year on Kauai, where, Kaumakani was almost burned from a wildfire event. And we'll hear a little bit from Aina after myself about how we're trying to address wildfire through land use policy. But basically, because of these different, the threats of these different climate hazards, Marie talked a little bit previously about our Kauai general plan, and in our general plan, it clearly states the need for us to adapt to climate change, as well as to reduce our greenhouse gases. And so that's really the purpose of this plan. Really, this plan is trying to provide a framework of different strategies and actions in which it can help to guide our county departments in how we may better adapt to climate change and how we may mitigate climate change. And so it does so through various different tools, ranging from looking at land use policy, infrastructure improvements, how it may help to strengthen or develop departmental programs, as well as help to adjust our budgets. A huge part of this plan is also looking at how we can help to guide and prioritize capital improvement programs. So I'm using the terms mitigation and adaptation, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what that means. So whenever I'm talking about mitigation, I'm basically referring to how we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, adaptation is how we can adjust our different systems so that we can reduce the potential harm to climate change impacts. And so and some of these strategies actually are both mitigation and adaptation, along with providing additional co-benefits such as equity. And so I kind of want to first also stress that this plan is a county plan, and so really the focus of it is on what we can do within our jurisdiction. So it looks primarily at things that the county can control, such as our parks, things like our neighborhood centers, things like our infrastructure systems, like our wastewater system, our county roads, and also looking at things like land use. However, with that being said, climate change is going to impact everyone, ranging from our residents, our businesses, and our visitors. And so this plan also looks at how we can work with others and uplift our community capacity to be able to address these impacts, and how we can partner with our different community organizations as well as state and federal agencies to better address things such as our eroding beaches and our drainage issues, and how we can better protect and preserve our cultural resources, just as example. And just to kind of go through the workflow, I know that I mentioned that this plan was first developed several years ago. So we first started this plan with doing a technical analysis phase. In this phase, we developed a climate hazard white paper in collaboration with Chip Fletcher at Manoa. And for this climate hazards white paper, it really gave the groundwork as to how the trajectory looks in terms of climate change and how it may impact Kauai. And then we also did a quantitative analysis where we mapped the different county assets on a map, and we did an exposure analysis to look at how these different hazards may impact these different assets. And then we complemented that with doing talk stories where we talk to different community members to get their observations to develop a vulnerability analysis. So this groundwork helped to just like allow us to better understand our vulnerability to climate hazards, so that would help us then in drafting these different strategies and actions to be able to address these impacts. So then our next phase was going out to the community and getting their observations as well as their thoughts and feedback on the adaptation strategies and mitigation strategies that they would like to see included in this plan. And that helped us basically in the drafting of this plan. So if you take a look on our website, which is KauaiAdaptation.com, you can see our draft plan on the website. Just to give you a little bit of sense of what that looks like, there's two parts to our plan. There's a part one, which is like a public-facing document that kind of gives the overview that I'm giving today. It gives a brief description of the different climate hazards as well as the vulnerability of Kauai and the process that we took to be able to develop this plan. And then it gives the various different strategies, broader strategies. So right now, currently, the plan includes 79 different strategies. But then in part two, we have specific actions that are broken down by county divisions that will implement these different strategies. So there's 79 different strategies, but I believe there's like over 200 or so different actions, specific actions that implement these broader strategies. And every single division or the different division action plans in part two will be given to our different departments so that they have this to be able to guide their workflow and their capital improvement projects, as well as their different projects going forward. And so I was going to kind of show some fun pictures on a presentation of the different engagement events that have taken place, but I'll just say very briefly that we've done a lot of engagement as part of this process, ranging from open houses to workshops, to surveys, to having an online story bank where people could go on our website and could write their place-based observations in specific areas on the island. We also did a lot of work with our youth, especially in recognition that they're the ones that are going to be most impacted and see the consequences of climate change. So we actually did a lot of work in going out to the schools, having presentations and interactive activities with the youth and inviting them to a youth summit. At this youth summit, I believe we had about 50 youth members who attended, and there was interactive activities that allowed these youth to better understand how Kauai is vulnerable to climate change, and then allow them to have a safe space to be able to give their observations as well as their feedback on how we can adapt to climate change and what they'll like to see in terms of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We also did some other unique engagements, such as we held a round of lunch talk stories with Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners around the island. We went to the different districts and we invited them for lunch, and we got to talk to them about some of the strategies included in our plan and hear their thoughts about the strategies and actions that they would like to see, especially in recognition that they're the best stewards of our islands, and they have a lot of important traditional ecological knowledge that has been passed down by generation to generation that can really help strengthen our plan to be more place-based. And so I just want to mention those two unique engagement events that took place. I guess I will just wrap this up by saying that you should take a look online at our different, at our part one and part two of our plan. especially the broader strategies. That's a bit more manageable to soak in. You'll also see when you take a look online that the various different strategies are organized by strategy types. And this is basically just to be able to understand, like, is this a strategy that would be a capital improvement strategy? Is this a strategy that is more assessment and planning related? Is this a strategy that is uplifts our community capacity? In our plan, we also have priority strategies, and these priority strategies were identified based off of various different criteria, which I'm not going to list all the criteria right now, but just for example, looking at if it can help to reduce cost of living, if it can, if it's a foundational strategy that is important to be able to implement other strategies in the plan. So right now, if you look online, I do want to emphasize that this is the draft that we took out to the community, and so we currently are incorporating all the comments from the community. So this draft is being finalized, including some of the priority strategies. And so, but it is something that you can still take a look at and see the bare bones of basically like what this plan will look like. I think that's all I really have, except that we do have strategies and actions related to wildfire, and one of the actions are actually already being implemented, and that's what Kaina is going to be talking more about today, a wildland urban interface code. So I'll pass it over to him, but I don't know if we want to do some questions again before we pass it over to Kaina.
Website?
Sorry?
Website.
www.kauaiadaptation.com.
Hello. What are the characteristics you mentioned equity? How does that work?
Yeah, you know, the way in which we define it is, it kind of breaks it down in two ways. One in which it looks at it from a term of like distributional equity and more like procedural equity. Like for instance, like procedural equity is like, how are we going about in implementing these strategies, and is it like is it engaging the right people to be able to implement these strategies in a way that can ensure that it's addressing their concerns as well. In addition to that, in thinking about equity, it also looks at cost of living. Like, will these strategies help to reduce the cost of living, as well as like, will these strategies make sure that it is addressing our most vulnerable populations, such as our kupuna and our keiki and our indigenous Native Hawaiian population and our BIPOC population, Black Indigenous people of color. I don't know if either of you guys want to add to that, or yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
I'm curious to know, how are you gonna fund 79 projects a day? Is this worked into our budget already or not?
Just repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question was, how are we going to fund these different strategies and actions in this plan overall? And as part of this plan, if you guys are interested, we do have an appendix that is a funding and financing matrix. We had our consultants look at the different ways that we can fund this plan, and it varies from looking at, you know, obviously grants, as well as how we can look at things like bonds, and even being creative with looking at certain types of taxes and whatnot. This is all very exploratory in terms of looking at the wide range of possibilities. So it's not saying directly like, this is how we're going to fund it, but it's showing the various ways in which these different actions could potentially be funded. You guys wanna add?
Okay, I'll do a brief intro on what we're doing with the wildfire aspects, of course. After Lahaina, I think everybody within the built environment, we're questioning ourselves, like, do we have a role in a post-Lahaina world as far as wildfire mitigation? And before I get into how we arrived at where we are today, I gotta tell a brief tale of the plantation camps and our involvement with the plantation camps. And GNR with Dana and Howard are here, and we've had essentially a partnership with them for the past almost 4 years. And this partnership goes back to the West Kauai Community Plan, in which we're looking at how we deal with the land use policies and how they should be adjusted for West Kauai about 4 or 5 years ago. And in that plan, we identified, it's like, does Waimea want to grow? Does it not want to grow? Does it want to evolve? Do we have parts of the land that should be up zoned or down zoned? And what we found, putting all Waimea and Hanapepe and all those towns on the side for now, the plantation camps were all within the agricultural district. So you have 4 or 5 plantation camps. You got Pakala, Kamakani Avenue, Kamakani Village, Numila, and Camp 6, Calvin. And they're all in the agriculture district, which means we have a de facto policy of the County of Kauai that we need to amortize these camps out of existence, and their tenants need to be moved to other areas. That was the de facto policy we had through our land use, because agriculture district, you can only have 5, maybe 10 homes. These 350 homes are all non-conforming structures that need to be amortized out under that policy. Clearly, that was a policy we needed to adjust. The camps are housing inventory in the middle of a housing crisis, as well as they are communities in and of themselves. So the first step we took in the West Kauai Community Plan was, let's create a plantation camp zoning district that allows Howard folks, as well as BBCP who own the other camp, to actually rebuild these homes. They couldn't rebuild these homes because they're non-conforming structures. So let's just allow them to rebuild what they have. So that was the first step. But beyond letting them rebuild, we recognize they should be able to evolve over time, as any community should. So we started looking at areas in the camps that were vacant, but would allow them to eventually build in those areas as well. And we spent about a year and a half, creating what are called form-based codes. Euclidean zoning, which we're generally used to, looks at uses. Industrial goes here, residential goes here, commercial is separated. Form-based code looks at some of the historic patterns of our development throughout history and says, the form and character and the design of the structures and the way they interact with the public thoroughfare really reigns more supreme than the use of the districts. And so looking at form-based code and the building designs that are within the camps and making sure that the camps can evolve and grow, we adopted these form-based codes so that future development would mimic and match up and coincide with the historical camps that they'd be adjacent to. And so we passed an expansion area for Kamakani Village. And then after that, we kind of spoke with Howard folks and BBCP, who was Numila, and said, there are other areas that can be expanded. Numila can be expanded. Ka'awanui can be expanded, perhaps even some parts of Palos. And so we started phase 2 of adopting form-based codes for those camps to allow them to expand. And that's where this wildfire nexus comes into play. Because simultaneous to us working on codes to update them, expand them, Lahaina happens, right? Then Kamakani almost happens. The fire gets right up to Kamakani. Kamakani's evacuated, and Kima is almost certain that the entire town of Kamakani is about to burn. But for the grace and God of the work GNR was doing to mitigate it with the fire department, Kamakani can't see. But the fire scarp, you can see it went right up to that village. So we really began saying, like, is there a role for planners in the planning department and zoning codes in wildfire resiliency? And the first response was, no. Like, what on earth can we do in a zoning code against a wall of fire? Like, we're beginning to adjust our codes to deal with sea level rise and flooding. Let's elevate or get out of the way. But what can you do against a wall of fire? But we still decided we're going to spend some time with this. And we got eyeballs deep into fire science with Elizabeth Pickett from the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, as well as an organization called Headwater Economics. And it took us some time, but ultimately, it's understanding that it's not the wall of fire that's burning these towns. The wall of fire will often go through, from a fire science standpoint, a wall of fire will often go through a town, and the town's still standing. The wall of fire didn't burn the town. The town only starts to burn 6 or 7 or sometimes 12 or 13 hours after that wall of flames is gone. Or sometimes the wall of fire is half a mile away and the town starts to burn. And the fire science shows us all, it's not the wall of fire burning these towns. It's the embers. In a high wind event, you have a blizzard of embers. The wall of flames, actually, wooden walls can withstand those wall of flames just moving through. But the embers intrude into the built environment. They land on wooden roofs, or they get into the vents, and then they're in your attics. Or they get under the undercarriage of your house, and there's stuff stored in your house. And it's the embers that is responsible for 90% of these town burning situations that we see in the past. And understanding that it's an ember issue is where we said we can actually look at calibrating the built environment to be able to withstand ember intrusion. And so that's when, literally, I was in Kansas City with a bunch of wildfire folks and some of our planners team, and I called Howard up, I called BBC up, and I said, I know we're about to introduce the upzoning for Ka'awanui, Numila, but there's wildfire science out there that will allow us to make adjustments to the policies that will help mitigate wildfire for your future expansion areas. And then both Howard and Sean Smith from BBC were very open to it. And so I won't go into the whole details and process of working it out, but ultimately when you're talking about embers, so we introduced the code, we worked with Howard Dana folks, we worked with BBCP, we introduced the code and spent some time, about 4 or 5 months at Planning Commission and Council. It just passed like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. The mayor's signature is still wet on this thing. But in a nutshell, when you're talking about ember intrusion and what the camp code does is it has zones. It has the primary structure zone, the actual house itself is a vulnerability. So in this day and age, sorry, wooden roofs are out. That is probably the biggest vulnerability when it comes to a wildfire standpoint and embers. So the code allows for corrugated metal roof, which is a historical design used in the camps, or asphalt shingles, which also can withstand embers landing on them and not creating a flame situation. So that's the first requirement of the house, what's called home hardening. The second requirement is the vents. Those vents up in the attic. You can have vents, they just need to be metal vents with what's called fire mesh screening. So 1/8 inch, so the embers can't get into that vent. Then if the house is elevated post-imperial construction, which we have here in Hawaii, same thing. That fire screening just goes around the post-imperial and prevents any embers from going in under the house and catching anything on fire. The science around the vents, the undercarriage of the house, a lot of the mainland guys don't see storage under the house as much as we see storage here. And so this question came, can we allow storage under there or not? And they just said the fire science isn't there. Elizabeth was like, I think you can, because if we put the vents, then it's going to prevent the embers from hitting the storage, as long as storage is, say, 3 or 4 feet away from those screens. But everybody's like, but the science isn't there. We don't know the science isn't there. And Elizabeth was like, you know, On-Call Fire Labs, they're going to set up a system for us in one of their laboratories, and we'll test it. And I was like, what are you going to do? Build a house, screen it under it, and try to burn it? And she was like, yep. That conversation, I was like, this is a whole new world that I haven't really experienced. But the access that she has to laboratory experience has been wild. So anyways, the undercarriage of the house is the third area of vulnerability. And then the actual siding of the house itself. You do not have to have fire-rated construction walls to stop embers. A wooden wall stops embers just fine. Embers hit it and then they drop. But where they drop could be a potential flashpoint. And so it's the 6 inches of the wall and 6 inches of it intersects a wooden line, just needs metal flashing. That's it. Just the metal flashing. And that's essentially what you need for home hardening. There are an additional set of zones. Zone 0, aside from the home itself, is the most vulnerable point, and that's 5 feet. Zone 0 is 0 to 5 feet from the house. What happens in that area can definitely have an impact on whether or not your house is going to catch fire. And that's generally referred to, it should be the non-combustible zone. Having non-combustible material in there is vital, and so that's essentially what the code requires. With the camp codes, and this is probably the most controversial area, it requires a concrete band of 5 feet around each new house. And that way it can be programmed that nothing will go in there, as well as it will prevent any combustible action happening from vegetation or what have you. How often a leaning broom has been demonstrated to be the reason the house caught fire? It's like a leaning broom. The broom is leaning against the house. The embers hit the house, drop, it's fine. The embers hit the handle, it's fine. The embers hit the broom bristles, that catches on fire, it climbs up the handle, and eventually the flame exposure to the walls where it catches it on fire. So that 5 feet is very important. And it's 5 feet essentially because when you have high wind events, the high wind event will create a 5-foot eddy that's found around the house. So anything within that 5 feet that the embers drop on that are combustible has the potential of catching the house on fire. That's primarily a programmatic approach as well. And then the code goes a little bit further in that it goes into zone 1, which is the 5 feet to 30 feet, and that's that's defensible space. And there are some vegetation requirements in there. But that is pretty much, in a nutshell, what the camp wildfire code is and exists today. Something came out, and it's I can say it's somewhat of a costly measure because of the concrete. The concrete is probably the most costly aspect of this requirement. And calibrating this code, knowing that the cost of construction is problematic in a way, we're very cognizant of it. There are other ways to potentially program the concrete where you may not have to have the concrete. But Unlimited Construction did a cost analysis as if they're going to bid out construction of a camp home with these new wildfire requirements. Yeah, the concrete came out to like $12,000 or $13,000. If you take away the concrete and we can potentially talk about other avenues, and you just look at the home hardening requirements for wildfire mitigation, the cost of materials came out to $2,700, which is less than 0.7% of the overall cost of construction of a house. We are always cognizant of what the cost is going to be for building homes. But looking at that nominal amount, $2,700 for camp homes and potentially arguably for other homes is there. Partly because one, we're looking at it from a built environment standpoint, but the folks that we've been working with on the mainland have basically said, this is gonna help with insurance. And I said, oh, will it drop their insurance rates? And they're basically, candidly, no, we're not seeing any of these type of codes drop insurance. But what we are seeing these codes do is they keep insurance around. You're seeing insurance providers just walk out of communities. And if you don't have insurance, you can't get a mortgage. And so making an analysis of how much this may be necessary from wildfire resiliency, but from an insurance standpoint, I think is crucial and vital. And what we did, we were just focusing on the camps, and like, it's only been a couple weeks, but there's been there hasn't been much media attention, much press release here in Hawaii. I'm not sure, nobody's really gravitated towards it, but the amount of people nationally that are pounding on our doors. I just got an email from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, which is like the national umbrella of insurance providers. They're kind of like, wait, what did you guys do? We really want to meet with you guys. This has implications across the globe on how they do certain work. And others have just been kind of knocking on our door to try to figure out how comprehensive this is. And clearly it has implications for other parts of Kauai, and we're going through that analysis right now. So that, I know I'm kind of rambling at this point, so I'll stop, and if you guys have any questions about wildfire, climate adaptation, just fire away. Thank you.
Okay, very good. The timing was perfect. I got the plans for my new home a week ago, met with the contractor a few days ago. And so while I'm sitting there, I just sent a text to my architect saying, in the mesh we have, do we have it, protected by a 1/8 inch mesh? I'll see if it was designed that way for me. But thank you for telling me that. Okay.
Thank you so much. I learned a whole lot when you presented all this to the council. I'm wondering if you could tell people, I got so many good ideas that I'd love for you to be able to share, like embers flying through the screen window and what it might land on, and embers going underneath the house and putting the mesh on. If you can just say a little bit about what that is, because we might have some contractors in the room, or I think this needs to be a whole small business where people come around and harden people's houses. I have a Hicks home, and I'm probably example A for what needs some help.
Yeah, I mean, generally in a wildfire event, you're gonna want to close. Generally in a wildfire event, you're gonna want to close the windows. Sometimes you're at home, so there's the ability to use some of this mesh on windows. And when I say wildfire event, like in close proximity, right? The flame doesn't have to be next to the neighborhood. It could be half a mile away. In a high wind event, the potential for the town burning is there. I think the fire chief has this quote that really made it all put in a picture where he's saying something to the effect of, in a high wind fire event, there are not enough fire trucks or firefighters to put out a fire in a town. There's just not enough. The only response you can do in a high wind fire event is have that built environment ready for those embers. And if it's not, high likelihood that town's gonna burn.
I'm sitting next to the person that you work with on development with camp zoning. Can that camp zoning be applied in urban context? Could the county or individual request that their area be zoned to allow camp zoning? Have you looked at that prospect and the possibilities of that for helping resolve some of our cost of housing issues? And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, 100%. When we went to the camps, like they are like a planner's, I jokingly, they are a planner's dream. Like there's these tiny little, what would be the equivalent of 3,000 square foot lots, relatively small homes, very close to the public thoroughfare. A public thoroughfare or a street that is actually substandard, is about 18 feet wide. And the way that the buildings interact with that street, making a driver feel unsafe going faster than 5 miles an hour, meaning the Keiki and the Kapuna own those streets. They're prioritized just by the way it was designed and the way it facilitates community. And the fact that these are historic and our zoning codes today prohibit and outlaw any development of that style. So our first phase was to be like, let's recognize it where it is and allow it to continue. I think the next phase is to take these kind of camp standards, and some of these codes are still at council, so we're waiting for action on them. hopefully we get action on those. And then I think the next phase is to look at, all right, calibrating a subdivision code that interacts with form-based code to allow camp style developments with substandard roads, 18 to 20 feet wide. And the main thing is making sure we negotiate, we discuss that with our fire department and our public works department, and both have signaled they're on board to allow another parts of the island.
Okay, we want to start, we want to end promptly, so thank you all very much for your presentation.